Hello and welcome to the Week 2 edition of the Survivor Show here on thelines.com. Matt Brown, Steven Andrus coming to you, and you're here for one of two reasons. You either listened to us and you dodged the Bengals last week, or you just love the way me and Steven look and talk. And I'm guessing that is not the answer that you are here. It's not the reason you're here. It's probably because of that first reason. I guess, Steven, we could add in a third reason. Some of them are rebuy pools out there. So I guess you could be here for a rebuy pool. But most likely you dodged the Cincinnati Bengals, which took out about 33 to 35% of your pool, depending on where you were playing. Steven, our rationale behind this was a couple of different things. And with all of that, it all kind of came to fruition. One of which was just the fact that, hey, there was future value in Cincinnati anyway, so you might as well hold that team if you didn't have to play them. Secondly, there was some question marks at the wide receiver position, which, Joe Burrow kind of needs his wide receivers in order to have some success out there. And three, it's still a quarterback coming off of a major injury, getting his first real game time in quite some time. And honestly, all three of those came into play here. Like, I held Cincinnati because I think there's better spots to use them. Joe Burrow definitely looked rusty. And he didn't have T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase is playing with an illness. And so with all of that, you get 34% to 35% of pools eliminated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are listening to that and saying, well, hindsight's 2020. But okay, if you want to take that argument, we told you best game theory in Survivor is just avoid the team who's the most popular. They may not lose every week, but if you're trying to play the best strategy possible for Survivor, we need to try and identify who the most popular team is each week and not pick them to increase our chances of being the sole survivor at the end. That's the whole idea, right?
Certainly, if there are other good choices. Yes, for sure.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
there
are
may
going
be
to be
week
weeks
or two where it's just too risky.
Yeah.
But last week was not that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we look here, heading into week number 2, there are some big favorites this week. The Baltimore Ravens are all the way up to 10-point favorites now over the Raiders. By the way, Steven, this opened at 8, so this has run a full 2 points now. The Ravens at home over the Raiders, big favorites there. The Lions are 7-point favorites over the Bucs. The Cowboys are 6.5-point favorites over the Saints. The Chargers are 6.5-point favorites over the Panthers. You got the 49ers that are 6-point favorites over the Vikings. And then to wrap things up, you have the Chiefs that are 6-point favorites over the Bengals. Actually, we also have the Texans 6.5-point favorites over the Bears. So, Steven, there's just a lot of different choices this week. This week is actually going to be super, super interesting because it is a lot of choices. It's a lot of decently good choices, and it is going to come down, I imagine, to who you just kind of favor, because outside of the Ravens, we know the Ravens will be the most popular pick. But outside of the Ravens, I bet it is pretty damn evenly spread amongst a bunch of other teams out there.
Yeah, so listen, we're recording on Tuesday afternoon. If you want to sign up for Pool Genius, our partners, it's in the description. They typically come out with all of their data and their popularity projections by the middle of the week. We don't have it right now. And also, we want to be respectful of the viewers who have actually subscribed and not give away all the information because they're paying for that. So what I can tell you is that on the free ESPN.com pool, it is clearly the Ravens as the most popular team earlier in the week. And number 2 is the Chargers at the Carolina Panthers. So they've ballooned up to about a 6.5-point favorite. But Matt, to your point, I think it's going to be pretty spread after the Ravens because and a lot of these other potential options are playing on the road this week, like the 49ers at the Vikings. So that's something to sort out as well.
Yeah. So to me, I think when people start to come to their senses a little bit more, Steven, and realize that, the Panthers are bad, but the Chargers are also not good. My guess is it's going to be like Ravens by a landslide. My guess is another kind of 30%-ish of the pools are all going to be on the Ravens. And then we're going to start seeing a whole bunch of kind of 8, 9, 10% plays amongst all of these other teams out there because, it is pretty risky to take the Chargers on the road against the Panthers, even as bad as the Panthers look, because, Steven, at the end of the day, the Chargers have told us what they want to do with this offense, which is just run the ball, which if that works, it's fine, but you're operating on a razor's edge, right? You almost have to be perfect. if you're going to execute that game plan week in and week out and win a bunch of ball games. And so I'm guessing we see Eagles and Texans and Cowboys and all of these teams. I mean, the only one I imagine we don't see a ton of that is a big favorite this week is the Chiefs, just because there is still a sentiment that the Bengals just played maybe the worst game they've played in the last 3 years this past week and actually start to figure things out. Does T. Higgins get back in the lineup? Jamar Chase won't be sick again this week, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm guessing the only big favorite we don't see heavily picked this week is the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Future value as well. It's always nice to have the Chiefs in your back pocket. And, I know I'm always going to give kind of the general survivor outlook here. And Matt, you kind of give the circa take because you are in Nevada. The Chiefs are the kind of a pivot point for the holiday schedule, right?
Yeah. So that's another reason why if you're playing in the circle and like the Chiefs should be the first team you scratch off this week as teams you're going to use because you need them for later.
Yeah, so like with the Ravens, Matt, again, number one reason I'm not using them personally is because they are going to be the overwhelming most popular team this week. The second reason is I think they do have pretty good future value. Now, it's going to be tough to be better than 10 points against the Raiders here in week 2, but looking down the line, week 6 at home against Washington, week 9 against Bo Nix in Denver. You get to later in the season, you have a game against the Giants on the schedule in week 15. Who knows what the Steelers are going to be in week 16 at that point with their quarterback situation. So it's not just that they're the most popular to me. It's also because I think they have a lot of future value. And I expect the O-line and the defense to get better as the season goes on with the new pieces that they've put in there.
Yeah, it is interesting, certainly, because I look at this and with the Ravens, outside of the one that you mentioned in week 6 against Washington, and even then, I think this is the best time to use them for sure. You do have the game against the Giants, but that's way out in week 15, and that's almost getting a little bit ahead of yourself. Like I agree looking out in advance for saving teams, but like looking out to week 15 is a bit optimistic. How many times have you guys ever made it to week 15 and survived? Yeah. Seriously, like how many times have you ever made it to week 15? So like I get
a lot changes. Like a week ago, we thought New England was the worst team in the league. One week later, we don't think that anymore.
Right. So it's one of those things where, I mean, I agree looking out in kind of week 8, week 9, week 10, stuff like that. Like looking out to week 15, I think is a little bit ambitious with everything. So my only holdup here, and the reason why I might actually end up on them this week is I think this might be the best time to use them. As bad as that Washington defense is, I'm a little scared of Jaden Daniels in that offense as they start to get a little bit better, as they start to like progress a little bit more. So although that is certainly a game that I do have circled for an option, right? Like I do have that as an option for me as well. It's kind of like is the grid that I've kind of made out for myself. So I don't know if I end up there for sure, but I just don't love really any of the other spots here for the Ravens moving forward. Look, they play in a really tough ass division. And on top of the playing on a really tough ass division, you get these other games. I mean, Dallas, Buffalo, you're getting friggin' Tampa Bay on the road, which, they look like they've got a pulse until they get hurt. As long as they stay healthy, they're going to be a tough out. You got the Eagles, so I don't know. If you want to use the Ravens this week, I'll put it this way, guys. If you want to use the Ravens this week, I would not talk you off of it because there's no like slam dunk spot in my opinion moving forward outside of that week 6, which they will certainly be significant favorites in that game against Washington.
I'll add one more nugget here with the Ravens, and why I'm not picking it. There is an app that's becoming more popular. It's called Splash. You can play Survivor games just right on an app on your phone. A lot of those pools for Survivor, once you get to a certain point in the season, are making people take 2 teams in 1 week. And the Ravens are on a short list of teams, about 5 or 6 of them that have at least 4 late season spots where they're going to be at least a 60% implied win rate or better late in the season. There's not many teams that have that many potential spots to use them late in the season. So because double check your rules. If you're in a pool where at some point you're going to have to pick 2 teams in a single week, then I think the Ravens are a team that you might have to save. And there's a couple other teams that fit that mold as well. Kansas City, Dallas, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Buffalo are the teams that come to mind.
Yeah, the other thing to mention, since you said that I'll kind of handle the circa angle of this. Yes, the Ravens are one of the Christmas Day teams, but you ain't playing the Ravens on the road against the Texans on Christmas Day. So right. Don't worry about that. That's the reason you're saving the Chiefs. It's Chiefs against the Steelers on Christmas Day. That's your play. That's the reason you're not burning the Chiefs. And so that's your hold game right there. But like, you don't want to find yourself getting that deep in the contest and you have to play the Ravens on the road at the Texans. Like that's not what
No.
that's not what we're planning for here. So this is not a team you have to save. Like this is a team that can be used and you don't have to worry about that.
Well,
if
not them, then who, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the question now that we have to answer before we wrap up. If not the Ravens, then who?
So, I mean, for me, if I'm not going to play the Ravens this week, I think I'm going to take a pretty long, hard look at some of these other squads that I think are good now, and I don't know necessarily about good later or the opponents that they play and things like that, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I really like the Texans and their prospects, right? But I mean, they're fully healthy right now. If CJ Stroud goes down, and I know that could be said about any team, but like they're rolling right now. They look good. I want to catch the Bears before the Bears figure anything out. So there's that, right? Like there's also that goes into it. I think Caleb Williams with all those receivers and all those everything, like by the middle of the season might have figured stuff out. But like early on, I think we saw this past week that was not the case. And so Texans certainly on the short list for me outside of the Ravens. And then I don't know, Steve, you got to tell me about the Chargers and the Panthers, because like that is maybe the scariest one that I think a lot of people are going to be on this week for me.
It's scary because the Chargers are in the second game of an era with Jim Harbaugh, and we don't know exactly what they are yet, right? And the Panthers could not have looked worse. Like they just cannot have looked worse. So it's obvious that's the reason why they're going to be a high percentage this week. But they still have to go across the country. I'm looking at the future schedule for the Chargers, and I'm not seeing much. I'm seeing maybe the Saints week 8, maybe the Titans in week 10. Denver is the highest implied win rate, and that's not until week 16. So if they're the second most popular choice, I need to at least consider them, because even in my pools where I have to pick 2 teams at some point, I mean, I'm probably not considering them until the last month of the season. So they're certainly going to be in my top 3 this week, the Chargers. It's going to be a high popularity rate, right, overall, but it's still not the most popular. As long as it's under 20%, I feel decent about it.
I think a lot of people, Steven, are going to play the Eagles this week against the Falcons, and I would at least pump the brakes a tad on that, mainly because, one, the Eagles are going to be favored basically every week that they play. So if you can keep a team that you're not really matchup dependent on in your pocket, that's just a good strategy as it is anyway. If you can always have a favorite that's going to be sitting out there that you can use, there's that. The other thing is kind of like we just said about Cincinnati, we probably saw the worst game the Falcons are going to play all year in week number 1, and I do wonder if we don't see a little bit better version of them moving forward. Plus, if you're the Eagles, games against Cleveland, New York, games against Washington, games against Carolina, game against Pittsburgh. Like there's just a lot of other spots to use them that are softer landing spots. And then also, like I said, they're going to be favored in basically every game as it is anyway. So if push comes to shove, I'll go to battle with a team like the Eagles. That's kind of like when you're holding on to a team like the Chiefs, right? You're holding on to the Chiefs, you're holding on to an Eagles. Like, I'll go to battle with them if push comes to shove and feel pretty good about it no matter what.
Yeah, I'm definitely not using the Eagles this week. Yeah. I'm looking at their schedule right now, and at least in terms of market projections coming into the year, they had 10 potential spots where you can use them, where they're going to have a money line converted to implied win rate of at least 60%, and 4 potential late season spots where you can use the Eagles. So I'm definitely not using the Eagles. We'll talk on the Monster Pod whether we want to lay 6.5 with them, because I heard a good nugget about Kirk Cousins being in shotgun week 1 more than he ever has been, and speculation of whether or not that's because he's not fully back from the Achilles or has limitations. So certainly going to be an interesting conversation when we have that on the Monster Pod. But yeah, I'm not using the Eagles this week. Matt, to me, the other team I'm considering is burning the Lions this week at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Just from a matchup standpoint, the Bucs are one of 2 teams that have some cluster injuries this week, and it's in their secondary. They had 3 DBs go down in the middle of that game against the Washington Commanders. And if I'm looking at potential future spots of where I want to use Detroit, it's kind of tough to find it. I mean, the market going into the year had them as a 71% chance against Seattle. I don't think that's going to be the case when they play each other in week number 4. If you look down the line here, maybe the Titans in week number 8, but that's a new regime. Maybe they're much improved by then. All the other spots are basically lit up in green because the Lions market rating is so high. So it's on the road against Minnesota, home against Jacksonville, and then 2 late season spots against Chicago. Maybe Caleb Williams has figured it out by then. And then Minnesota the final week of the year. And we're not even going to worry about the final week of the year. That's a good thing if we get there with anybody available. So I think the Lions are maybe the best spot you're going to get other than week 8 to use them this week against Tampa Bay.
The only other team I think we should discuss, because it is going to be what your perception is of the 2 teams, because the Cowboys host the Saints this week. And the Cowboys basically didn't have to put up any effort to win that game against the Browns. That was absolutely putrid performance by Cleveland in that game. Kind of the same could be said about the Saints versus the Panthers. That thing was over from jump. Do we believe that both of these teams are as good as we saw in week 1? Do we believe that there was an aberration going on here? Because if you look at the Cowboys, Stephen, this is the only other deal. Baltimore, then back-to-back roadies. Not that you're scared about using them on a roadie against the Giants, but still, road games are road games, and it's a short week on a Thursday. So roadie against New York, roadie against Pittsburgh. Then it's the Lions. Then it's on the road at San Francisco, on the road at Atlanta, Philadelphia at home, Houston at home. You might not want to use them again. It's like until week 12 or 13 on the road against Washington, at home against New York. Like holding on to a team like Dallas for that long, I mean, it would be great, sure, if you had them in your back pocket for something like that, right? But it's at least a decision, I think, to be made where you're going, I don't really want to use Dallas this week, but when the hell else am I going to use them?
Yeah, I could see both sides of the argument here for sure, because they are perhaps as fragile of a team in the NFL. If either Dak or CeeDee Lamb goes down, they're pretty much toast in terms of wanting to use them in Survivor, right? And to answer your question about this matchup, I'll at least give a couple quick thoughts here before we go into the deep analysis on the Monster Pod. I'm not taking a ton away from the Saints game against the Panthers, other than I love the increase in pre-snap motion and play action for Derek Carr. I think that's really positive. We see a lot of that with teams like the 49ers, but the offensive line is still rough, and Micah Parsons is on the other side. So I feel pretty much fine about Dallas, especially when they play at home. But ultimately, I'm not going to use them because of late season value. And really just overall, they have 7 potential spots this year to use them. And only the Chiefs have more late season spots where they're potential candidates to use from week 12 on.
Yeah, the only thing I will point out too, just the caveat for the Circa people out there, Cowboys are your Thanksgiving Day team as well. So they get the Giants on Thanksgiving Day. So yeah, so just for the Circa people out there, Cowboys used to scratch them off as well. Steven, I'm probably going to go chalk this week and play the Ravens. Okay. Because again, I can't play the Chiefs. I can't play the Cowboys. I'm in my contest is at Circa. Might split them up and do 2-1 like I did this past week, which by the way, guys, I did split it up. I ended up doing one on Seattle, 2 on Buffalo. I might split it up and throw one in on the Texans. Like I said, I kind of want to get at the Bears earlier than later. I think that there's a chance that the Bears become froggy at some point throughout the course of the season as a little bit more experience for Caleb Williams and stuff. So might do a 2-1 like Ravens and then 1 on the Texans.
Yeah, I like where your head's at, and I like that we're approaching it this way. You're kind of giving the just get to the finish line and figure it out later and see how much money we're going to win. I'm giving a game theory perspective that, theoretically increases the chances of being the sole survivor. And again, the Pool Genius subscription gives you those options. You hit one button and it gives you the just survive and then the plus EV path for every week the rest of the year after you plug in the teams you've already popped in. So it's an awesome tool. Again, link in the description if you want to subscribe over at Pool Genius. Matt, my top three.
The sneaky play is the Colts. Like against Malik Willis. Like we've seen enough Malik Willis to know what Malik Willis is in the NFL.
For the record, Eli Hershkovich has already taken the 3.5 with the Packers. Like he is not afraid of the plug your nose special. I'll give him that. But that doesn't mean they're going to win either. But your point is well taken with Indianapolis. And if you look at the rest of their season, Tennessee week 16, that's about it. So I could certainly see it with Indy for sure as a candidate. I would put them at least in the top 4. I don't know if they're making my top 3 because they are on the road, but I think top 3 for me, again, no Ravens. I'm not using the most popular team. For me, I'm going to put the Lions number 1. I feel great about them right now. They're fully formed. I have no issues with them, and the Bucs secondary is totally depleted, and I don't care how Baker Mayfield looked against perhaps the worst pass defense in the league in the Washington Commanders. So Lions number 1 for me. I'll go Chargers number 2 against the Panthers because I do think the Panthers are a dumpster fire. They also lost one of the best players on the defensive line last week for the season. So the Chargers are going to be able to run it down their throat. And lastly, I think I will go Texans with you against Chicago. Everything you said about the Texans this week does make a lot of sense to me.
All right, guys, everything we do absolutely free. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. Let us know what's going on with you and your survivor pools. Did you make it through? Did you rebuy? How did you go about everything? Hopefully you are here with us throughout the course of the season. Hopefully we're talking about our own entries here throughout the course of the season, not these theoretical entries that are out there. At least have survived through week 1 as we head in here to week number 2. If you want to discuss even further in the NFL, upper right-hand corner of thelines.com is our Discord. Absolutely free. Talking every single sport in there all year long. For Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your week 2 survivor picks.